I want to put my money where my mouth is and put some actual odds on the Missouri quarterback race. Plus, a former Kansas signee is back on the market, and the Tigers could be looking for yet another 2023-2024 player. Let's talk about all this and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. And when you enter promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. And thanks again for joining me today. And I saw a topic on the Power Mizzou message board recently about the odds, setting the odds. Yes, this is a segment my other sponsor, FanDuel, would definitely love, but the odds for who is going to start the first game at quarterback for Missouri. More specifically, who takes the first snap? Because, of course, who knows? Maybe within the first game, you never know. There could be a change at quarterback there. So you got to get specific with these types of future bets. Well, to me, it's pretty obvious that Brady Cook is the leader in the clubhouse, and I would put him as a pretty significant favorite, even as high as even minus 200. But you know what? That seems a little bit getting ahead of ourselves. So I'll just go minus 150 with Brady Cook. And if the guys over at FanDuel actually did that, I think there might actually be some decent value there. But then I think the guy running in second, and again, this is all based on pure speculation at this point and all the information that we have available to ourselves. But I think Sam Horn is probably your number two right now. So I'll put him at just under 2-1 at plus 185, excuse me. So you bet 100, you'd win 185. If Sam Horn indeed takes the first snap for the Tigers this fall. And third, I'll go with Jake Garcia, also plus 250. So you put down 100, you'd win 250 with Jake Garcia. I just haven't heard the buzz that I would have thought I would have heard from Jake Garcia or Sam Horn, quite honestly, at this point, although Horn obviously had his spring cut short. So there's a good explanation there. At the same time, during last season, we never heard any incredible buzz about Sam Horn one way or the other, whether it was through the media, through players talking, whatever it is. Maybe Eli Drinkwitz and company really run that tight of a ship when it comes to letting things get out of practice. But I think everything, the actions that happened last season, the fact that Horn took essentially a handful of snaps last season and one freezing cold ball game against New Mexico State, those were his only snaps of the entire season. Well, that kind of tells you what the coaching staff thought about him, at least last season. They thought he wasn't ready. So far, at least, there's no real evidence to say that he's ready. So to me, with Horn and Garcia still being really a mystery at this point, no positive buzz really coming out of camp. Plus, on top of that, you got Drinkwitz's own words. Pretty obvious Cook has got to be the leader in the clubhouse. In fact, I think I got to move him from minus 150 to minus 200. Just to protect my house at this point. And, of course, congratulations to Columbia, Missouri native Michael Porter Jr. and former Tiger Michael Porter Jr. on his NBA championship. Fun series, even though it was just 5 games, of sort of an odd game 5 for sure. And it's almost as if Michael Porter Jr. listened to my previous podcast because, once again, Porter could not find his jump shot, especially not from three-point range in game 5, along with the rest of the Nuggets, by the way, or so it would seem. But the Nuggets won anyway, and a lot of that was based on Michael Porter Jr. doing a lot of the little things, like rebounding the basketball, cutting, playing some decent defense on occasion. Not always, of course, not his strong suit at this point in his life, but I just was impressed with how he did put his head down. Michael Malone, his coach, gave him a lot of credit, too, for just putting his head down, playing hard, and playing a team game, despite the fact that he himself wasn't knocking down the shots that at the rate any of us would have expected. And, oh, by the way, shout out to listener Scott, who a while ago pointed out that, oh, by the way, Michael Porter, not the first Tiger to win an NBA championship. No, Klay Johnson was reserve with the Lakers in 1982. And not only that, there's a couple more way back with the St. Louis Hawks in 58. This, according to Dave Matter, Med Park, and Win Wilfong also won NBA titles all the way back again in 58 with the St. Louis Hawks. So that is obviously another time completely. So forgive me for missing that. But yeah, the Klay Johnson one, surprised I forgot about that one, to be honest with you. So, hey, now we've solved that mystery completely. Glad Dave Matter and Scott Harrison helped me out there on the back end. Thank you to both of you. And by the way, speaking of rebounding, this is a random thought here, but is there an advanced stat that factors in when somebody misses a shot that is then immediately rebounded by that same shooter and put back in? Because it seems to me when that happens, you rebound your own missed shot and immediately put it back in the hoop. That shouldn't be given the same negative value as a 25-foot prayer. Call me crazy. If you're getting that good of a shot that, I don't know, maybe you botched the first one, but it was so easy that you immediately get it back and put it in. I don't know. There almost should be a factor there. If you're just so big and overwhelming is really the point. You're such a massive human being. Well, why don't you get extra credit for that? And frankly, coming up later in the show, I want to talk about why big men in general across not only college basketball, but pro basketball as well are the least valued they've ever been in the history of basketball. But I also want to talk about a former Kansas Jayhawk signee, a high school guy who is back on the market, and it sure looks like Dennis Gates is interested. So let's talk about that possibility. But first, I want to tell you about bird dogs. And you know what, folks? Usually during this read, I tell you about how my summer goal is to wear nothing but golf clothes and swim trunks. Well, bird dogs is still the favorite. It's still the absolute perfect solution for that particular goal. But you know what? I'm coming up short of my goal this year, and it's my own fault. I broke my foot this past Friday. It's official. I got an x-ray yesterday. Broken metatarsals, the fourth and the fifth. Those are the big ones, right? Come on. You got to have those. But seriously, though, I've injured myself, and now my summer has been somewhat ruined. But you know what? Bird dogs will help you improve your summer because you're not an idiot like me. Show yourself wearing your bird dogs in style and go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code lockedoncollege for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, especially to get on a cast. We promise you that. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for you everydayers, well, tonight I'm going to have a bit of a live stream. Well, I shouldn't say I'm going to have it. I'm going to be joining a live stream with pretty much all of the Locked On SEC hosts for a live reveal of the 2024 football schedule. Who are Missouri's the two opponents going to be outside of your usual schedule? Actually, the whole schedule. That's what the deal is. What am I talking about? We don't even have divisions anymore. Sorry, it's hard to keep up with all the change. And then, well, the non-change. There won't be 9 until at least 2025. But again, we're going to know who Missouri's playing in the SEC, the 2024 football season. Tonight, I'll send out all the information on my social media at Locked On Mizzou. But you know what? Let's go back to basketball for a second, because Brandon Jenkins over at 24/7 Sports had an interesting report that Chris Johnson, a 4-star player, the 40th ranked player in the country, according to Rivals.com, well, he's still waiting for his release from his letter of intent to Kansas. If I had to guess here, and the day and age we're in, I doubt Kansas is going to fight this real hard or to the letter of the law or anything. That type of PR, anytime you're perceived as being anti-player empowerment or empowerment, if you will, well, that tends to not go over well on social media these days. I don't think the Kansas Athletic Department and Bill Self are going to want any of that smoke. So it's my anticipation that eventually Chris Johnson is going to be back on the market. And according to Brandon Jenkins, well, among the many teams that are in pursuit, that have sources that have reached out to Chris Johnson. Again, the 4-star guard, 40th best player in the country, according to some. Well, Missouri is one of them. Yeah, that's right. Just because you signed a letter of intent with Kansas, that doesn't mean you were ever a Jayhawk, in my opinion. Just give him, a nice christening of some sort. I don't know, some sort of religious ceremony where we can at least get the juju back in the right direction. But seriously, though, obviously, if you're Missouri, you can get a kid who's ranked that high, whether he's a Jayhawk or he's not a Jayhawk. You just take him at this point. This isn't even a transfer portal guy. This is a high school player who's yet to even play in college. A 6'6" shooting guard. Sounds like a perfect fit for what Dennis Gates likes to do. He likes size at any position he can possibly get. No question about that. And by the way, speaking of Missouri and Kansas, didn't mention this in the last week or so, but it is official now. The next Missouri-Kansas game is going to be Saturday, December 9th, the third game of this 6-game series in Allen Fieldhouse. Do the Tigers have a chance? I think they might. Could be interesting. So I think people are underestimating this team. And speaking of people that are being underestimated lately, basically, unless you're Nikola Jokic, who just won the NBA title, or you're Joel Embiid, or even somebody like Michael Porter Jr., who has none of the trappings of a traditional post player or center by any means, but he's 6'10", blah, blah, blah. My point is, unless you're some multi-talented guy who can shoot threes and dribble between your legs and all that good stuff, well, suddenly big guys who can just rebound and play defense and occasionally score around the basket have been utterly, utterly dismissed, now more than ever. Well, I think it's now gone a little bit too far, especially when I see people acting like Connor Vanover, the former Arkansas Razorback, played his ball at Oral Roberts last season and is now transferred to Missouri for his last year of college basketball. I just think he's being overly trashed by people, some Mizzou fans even, which I don't really understand for the life of me, especially to do it out publicly, because sort of like when you boo your own players at the game, I got to ask, who is this helping other than you maybe blow off some steam? That doesn't, in my hierarchy of importance, that doesn't rate very high. And it certainly doesn't help the team whatsoever, whether it is, again, negativity on social media or negativity actually expressed live in the stadium. But here's the point. I'm telling you, Connor Vanover is better than you think he is. If you're being that negative, look at his numbers last season at Oral Roberts. He actually had his best season as a college basketball player. Yes, there are going to be times when it's going to be a bad matchup for Connor Vanover, and he's probably not going to be on the floor. Fine. We'll have a better combination with a smaller lineup. That's fine. That's college basketball in 2023. And I like the flexibility that Vanover gives us, because guess what? When there's a 7'3" guy, maybe even as tall as 7'5", he's been listed on the floor, that generates attention, especially when he can, again, block shots, rebound, and he shot over 150 3-pointers at an over 30% clip last season. That's not nothing, and he fits quite well, in theory, in Dennis Gates' offensive system. If you can just play off of him with little handoffs and pick and pops and stuff, he's going to create a lot of space, ironically, for a guy who's so big, but he's going to create space in the lane for everybody else. Really, it's my anticipation that next year's Missouri squad is going to have enough good guards that they're going to play at a hyper speed next year. Missouri obviously played really fast kind of the first half of the season, and still fast the second half of the season, but considerably slower than how it started. Well, I just think next year it's going to be closer to what we saw the first half of the season. That seems to not be a coincidence that Dennis Gates decided to start off playing as fast as he possibly could have. He was trying to see the limits of what he could get to with that particular roster, but that seems to be a stylistic choice and a preference as well. So, again, I think Vanover being added to this roster just adds such a wild card element to a team that's mostly going to be a lot about scoring quickly shooting from deep, to have a guy who can gum up the works, change the game completely at certain times. A guy his size, I think it's really interesting. And again, a guy you're not counting to start and play 30 minutes a game. So lower your expectations and just realize that he's kind of a matchup specific player and tool, if you will. Well, there's been a fairly surprising amount of pushback from many of the SEC coaches on going to a 9-game conference schedule in 2025 moving forward. And I say surprising, I guess, because, well, if Eli Drinkwitz is on board with it, it's a little bit confusing as to why seemingly a majority of coaches, including Nick Saban, really aren't on board with it. And the point here is, it seems to me that SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, just based on the tea leaves that I've been reading, tends to agree with me. I think he wants to move this baby forward, get some more money for the conference, get that 9th game, get some more leverage against ESPN, whatever it might be. It all comes down to dollars and cents, right? But I think Greg Sankey, for this upcoming 2024 schedule, it's going to be no divisions anymore, apparently. We're going to that immediately with OU and Texas, Oklahoma and Texas, of course, coming into the conference, not this season, but the season after. So I think Sankey is going to mostly make this schedule look like what a 9-game schedule likely is or likely will look like in 2025. So what that means, I think you're definitely going to see Missouri play Arkansas once again in 2024. I think that's a pretty safe bet. I think the conference likes that rivalry. They like that Missouri has sort of established, a good geographic rivalry with the longest border that Missouri has in the SEC. Correct me if I'm wrong there. That has to be correct. But anyway, the point is, I think the SEC, for a lot of different reasons, wants to maintain the battle line, aka Ozark Bowl rivalry between the Tigers and the Razorbacks. I also think Missouri's going to play Oklahoma in 2024. So bring on the Sooners the first season, because I think that's definitely going to be to me, this ultimately is going to get to 9 games. So whether Nick Saban likes it or not, in this particular case, I think Greg Sankey's opinion and also Bob Iger's opinion, for instance, the CEO of Disney, I think his opinion matters more than Nick Saban's, no matter how powerful he thinks he is. So eventually we're going to get to 9 games. And when that happens, I think Missouri's going to play Arkansas, Oklahoma, and then it's just a matter of the third opponent. A lot of people have been speculating that Vanderbilt could be it. Hey, if you're a Missouri fan, that sounds great on paper. At the same time, I wouldn't get too excited, because if Missouri's going to play Vanderbilt every season, the SEC isn't stupid. They know that that's going to anger a lot of schedulers, a lot of Missouri opponents in the SEC too. So what's going to happen then? Well, every other year, Missouri will probably play either LSU or Alabama or Georgia or something in a certain slot. They're not just going to get an easy schedule every year, even if one of their third common opponent is the easiest in all of the conference. Believe me, there will be something done to balance that out otherwise, because again, we're not going to have the same rigidity one way or the other of the intra-division schedule, I should say. And finally, I am realizing that I did leave off some quarterbacks from the discussion there, of the odds discussion. You know what? How about Jabari Johnson? Obviously, he's the most notable guy to most fans at this point, the true freshman, 4-star player from, I believe, the Tacoma, Washington area. I'll give him a 10-1 shot. Maybe that's even a little bit low. How about 15-1 to get some action on it? I don't see it as incredibly likely, but it's certainly not 100-1 likely either. That's probably where I'd put Tommy Locke. But Dylan Liable, now there's the interesting one, a guy that some people thought was the best quarterback for Missouri during the spring. That was the vibes you got. Wasn't the vibes that, hey, Horn looks good or Garcia looks good, more particularly, but no, it was more Dylan Liable. It still just seems incredibly unlikely that in this season, when Eli Drinkwitz knows that he's probably got to have a good season this year at the very least, he's going to come to a guy with not only no experience, but no scholarship either. I mean, I guess I'll give him 25-1 to start, but even that seems a little bit generous. So again, thank you all for joining me here today on Locked On Mizzou. And as always, for all you everydayers out there. And again, watch for my social media. I'll put out the link to the live SEC schedule release for football. Again, in a couple seasons here, 2024. Here, the soon enough when I get the link. So keep your eyes peeled anywhere at Locked On Mizzou. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.